All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. Wait, let's wait for Sir Cholo to come back. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Prime Philippines Prime Radar. My name is Pia Gira, and I'll be the moderator and host for this afternoon. So let's wait for a couple more people to arrive. I think we are having a few technical difficulties. But first, let's begin. So I can start by introducing our speakers for today. First, we have Sir Cholo Florencio from Prime Philippines, the for the Senior AVP for Property Advisory. Next, we have Miss Ruth
Good
Coyoca.
afternoon.
Hi, Sir Cholo. Next, we have Miss Ruth Coyoca, our Regional Head for Visayas of Prime Philippines. We have Miss Chai Abaya, our Regional Head for Mindanao.
Hello.
We also, okay, there you go. Hi, Sir Jet.
Hello, hi.
We would also like to, okay, we would also like to welcome our esteemed guest, Mr. Rodem Perez, the OIC and AVP for Business Development and Enhancement at the Clark Development Corporation. And similarly, we would also like to introduce our CEO and Managing Director here at Prime Philippines, Mr. Jet Yu. Hi, okay, is everybody ready for this afternoon's webinar?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't joined us in our webinar in the past, here at Prime Philippines, we actually like to invite our audience to be a big part of our presentation. So before we begin with our webinar today entitled The Road to Recovery, the current trends and updates with the Philippine real estate market, we would like to introduce our first poll. So for our audience, we would like you to answer the first poll. In your opinion, which of the following is the most promising trend in the real estate market right now? So all throughout our presentation, we'll be having numerous polls, but this is our first, and we will also be showing the results at the end of this. So let's begin. Sir Cholo, ready?
Yeah.
Hi. Okay. So first things first, we will be talking about Metro Manila's current property trends. Next, Cebu, and then after that, Davao. To cap off our webinar for this afternoon, we'll be having a joint panel discussion with all of our speakers. Okay. All right, Sir Cholo, you have.
Good afternoon, everyone. My co-presenters and our guest for today. Good afternoon to all the attendees that have decided to join this webinar for today. First up, I would like first to present, of course, the Metro Manila updates and trends for the first half of the year. Before that, I would first like to give you a brief glance of the Philippine economy, where we're at right now. First things first, of course, the good thing about the economy right now, in spite of what we're going through since the lockdown and the pandemic, is that we have maintained a very good credit rating, no, from Moody's, Fitch, and S&P so far to date. Aside from that, of course, the median age for our workers has been maintained at 24 years old. So we're very glad that we have maintained these types of strong macroeconomics fundamentals to date. Unfortunately, though, a lot has been affected by the pandemic and the lockdowns that we have experienced since March, particularly foreign investments, foreign tourist arrivals. Sorry, I mean. So this has been down about 50% from the same period last year to 1.32 million for the period of January to April 2020. Aside from that, foreign direct investments have also been affected by the pandemic, the lockdowns, and we have so far been able to only receive about $1.9 billion from foreign direct investments. Okay, for the first quarter, this has contracted to about 14.2% from the 1.9 billion we received last year. It's down to 1.7 for the first quarter. The slowdown of FDIs, of course, reflects the continued weak global and domestic demand prospects, no, prompting investors to really put their plans on hold due to the pandemic that we're facing right now. Aside from that, of course, BPO revenues have still been 26.3 billion for the last year. First quarter OFW remittances have also been down to 7.4 billion pesos. But of course, the main highlight, of course, is really our decline in the GDP, which the country has experienced, of course, negative 16, which means that the economy has shrank by 16.5%. And of course, inflation as of July is 2.7%. Moving on, for the market trends for Metro Manila, office sector. So we've seen, based on our data and experiences that we've had with our clients, there have been a number of delays in construction, particularly in the office building sector. A lot of our clients have put their projects on hold. But of course, we're hoping, very hopeful also, that come 2021, we would see a rise and resumption of these development projects. So as of the first half of 2020, Metro Manila has a total of 9.6 million square meters in leasable space. We see that by 2021 and 2022, more projects will resume their construction and completions by then. As far as the occupancy is concerned, we saw a slight decrease in occupancy levels, particularly due to the fact of a slowdown in expansion for the online gaming operators and the BPO, IT BPM companies in Metro Manila. They have normally delayed their expansion plans, waiting for more favorable business climates. Although Makati and Quezon City, of course, have experienced better occupancy rates, we still expect that this will drop in the coming months due to the implementation of some companies, especially the IT BPM or the BPO companies, to flexible work arrangements or telecommuting. So as far as demand is concerned, tenants have been more concerned about their costs. That's why they have been limiting their expansion plans and resorted to, of course, telecommuting or work from home arrangements. Landlords, in turn, of course, would like to retain their tenants. So they have, of course, negotiated for concessions, favorable rental conditions for the tenants in order to retain them. Of course, the growth that we expect is minimal in the coming months, as of course rental rates will see a short drop, no, as more companies, given the restriction in transportation, the lockdowns, will see a decline in really the growth of the rental rates this coming months. But of course, we see a strong rebound by next year. Some of the factors, of course, that have affected the market, no, of office space during this time of pandemic, of course, is the outsourcing firms. We have noticed that not all companies have seen growth in terms of expansion. They have normally decided to lease much smaller spaces. If they expand, they don't expand that much in terms of square meters, because of course of the alternatives in work from home arrangements. The need for flexible workspaces is seen as a good, a good point, because As companies would like to downsize their operations, flexible workspaces seem to be a good solution for them. It allows them to, of course, occupy smaller spaces and spread out their operations. As far as the transfer and expansion, we see a slowdown there. And one good thing also is more companies are realizing the need for recovery sites. So we have also experienced some inquiries and requirements for more recovery sites to ensure business continuity, especially for the IT BPM companies. Satellite offices are sure to pick up as well, increase the mobility among organizations, spread out to certain outskirts of the main CBDs where a large pool of labor force is located. Then we have the downsizing, which of course negatively affects because a lot of companies are cutting costs, cutting employees as well. So we have seen a demand in smaller office spaces, which are more suitable for their operations until such time, of course, we have favorable economic conditions for the office sector. One emerging trend, of course, in the office sector, particularly in the BPO industry, is the hub and spoke model, which simply means that you have a central office, the hub is right in the middle, and the spokes are different satellite offices located in several regions or provinces or outskirts, which are, of course, near the residential areas and have a large labor pool. The main, of course, reason why companies are shifting to a hub and spoke model, of course, is the growing footprint of the company. They want to expand in the provinces due to decentralization, mitigation of operational costs, of course, lower rent in the provinces, and then to improve the flexibility and the tapping of the large talent pool which are located in the provinces. Key criteria, of course, for hub and spoke. Number one, of course, the availability of infrastructure, connectivity, internet connection, availability of suitable office spaces to for their operations. Next, of course, available of utilities, internet connection. Next would be, of course, they need the labor pool and the very favorable business environment for them to locate in those emerging spokes. Other potential hubs, of course, that we see outside Metro Manila, of course, are Cebu, Davao, Clark for one, Laguna, and Iloilo. One of the main locations that we have continuously been monitoring and experiencing a lot of demand in recent months, even actually before the quarantine and lockdowns were implemented, is of course Clark. This is primarily due to the fact that number one, it's very near Metro Manila. Infrastructure, build programs of the present administration have focused in the area, thereby attracting more locators to come to the area. Not only that, we also see Clark being an economic zone is very good for tax incentives for the corporations who decide to locate their services there. This also is in support, of course, of the administrative order by President Duterte, decentralizing the whole of Metro Manila and moving offices outside of the region. So we see Clark Global City as one major destination. We have a lot of brands who have been locating there. New Clark City, of course, we have Philinvest there. And of course, the Clark Freeport Zone when we have a lot of industrial complexes. Moving on to the retail sector. Like office space, we see the supply movement of commercial centers to be really affected by the pandemic. In fact, of course, we see among all sectors or asset classes, the retail sector has been the one who is mostly greatly affected by the pandemic. For the first half of 2020, there were no significant mall completions recorded in Metro Manila. Quezon City, being the largest in Metro Manila, accounted for 1.8 million square meters of leasable area, or about 35% of the total area of Metro Manila. By 2020 to 20, within 2020 to 2022, we see an additional supply of about 700 square meters in the main CBDs of Metro Manila. Among them are malls which are located in BGC, the Mitsukoshi Mall, malls of Ayala in Arca South, and the expansion of the Mall of Asia complex. For the demand, of course, there have been a lot of retail concessions provided to tenants by our landlords. We see a gradual decline of the occupancy rates in Metro Manila malls, particularly regional malls, from 96 to about 95%. Rental rates have remained stable for about 1,400 to about 2,600 per square meter in the main CBDs. The continuous, of course, effect of OFW remittances have greatly affected the consumer spending of most families, thereby affecting their purchasing power. So this would likely impact the tenancy and operations of mall in the coming months. But then again, real estate industry, particularly the retail sector, we see a lot of optimism, a lot of rebound is seen for the coming years, especially starting 2021. You'll notice on the left side, of course, the occupancy rates remain very promising, between the mid 90s to high 90s in terms of the occupancy rate. Moving on to the residential sector, projects have been put on hold for the meantime until such time that favorable working conditions and economic conditions are established. For the first half, more than 8,000 units were added to the existing supply of Metro Manila. These projects are located in the Bay Area, Alabang, and Makati. And then most of them are expected to be completed in the coming years, starting 2022 until 2023. We've seen, of course, a slowdown in terms of the demand for the residential condominium units due to, of course, travel bans, the limited, the restrictions, I mean, for people to travel, the declining OFW remittances, which have greatly affected the spending power of people, of course, and the rising unemployment rate brought about by the lockdowns. Projects in the pipeline include the Avida Towers Sola in Quezon City, Central Park in Makati, Seasons Residences in BGC, and Residences in the Ortigas Central Business Districts. In addition, pre-selling rates, of course, in these main CBDs key locations have been relatively promising, over 90% in terms of their pre-selling rates. Supply has also been relatively stable for 2020. We expect more supply in the coming years to accelerate as the economy shifts to a better environment. So for the condominium selling prices, of course, we still have Makati BGC as the front runners with 435 and 400 pesos per square meter as the highest rates for BGC and Makati, followed by the Bay Area with about 380,000 pesos per square meter selling rates as of the first half of 2020. Stable prices for residential condominiums are seen for the first half of 2020. And then we don't see any particular spike in the prices of condominiums for at least for 2020, the remaining second half. Some trends to watch out for, of course, are more flexible payment packages offered to prospective buyers, developers redesigning their spaces to make it more attractive and more appealing to the new normal, redevelopment of projects, of course, and the conduction of virtual tours by these top developers to make it more accessible while people are staying at home. The hotel sector, of course, deluxe hotels continue to dominate the main CBDs of Metro Manila. There have been no significant additional movement in terms of additional rooms from the hotel sector for the first half of 2020. And about 42% belong to the deluxe or high-end classification, which is mostly located in the prime CBDs of Makati, BGC, and Bay Area. So additional rooms by the end of 2020 until 2021 are still expected, but not that much. You see the distribution of hotel rooms, which are operating in Metro Manila by all segments. Quezon City and Makati and the Bay Area still lead the cities with most hotels which are operating during the first half of 2020. For the room rates in hotels in central business districts, of course, the online rates, of course, are still led by BGC and Makati, followed by the Bay Area. These three main CBDs are, of course, the destinations of the priority destinations of our employees and some tourists who are available to who have been limited to staying in these hotels. Of course, the room rates are, of course, mainly affected by the slowdown in operations. We have seen, since travel is not allowed during the quarantine period, the hotels have mainly relied on bookings from companies, especially the BPOs, who have decided to assign rooms for their employees to make it nearer, to make them more accessible to their place of work. Aside from that, of course, we have had also clients who, of course, from the manning and the seafarers who have decided to book their stay to these hotels, especially in Manila, while they're waiting for their COVID test results as quarantine mandatory guidelines from the Department of Health. The rates for the first half of 2021, of course, have remained lower compared to the previous years, given the fact that the hotels have really been affected by the pandemic, and most of them have been temporarily closed because manpower has been limited for their operations. 30 to 50% drop in occupancy have been experienced based on data gathered by our team. Hotels located in Quezon City, Makati, and Alabang these are the ones usually occupied by the BPO companies because these are the hotels nearer to their place of work. Hotels in Ortigas, on the other hand, of course, have a mix of workers, essential workers, the frontliners from the medical field, and then, of course, guests who were endorsed by the Department of Tourism. Aside from this, we have also experienced quite a number of demand in the city of Manila for returning OFWs or seafarers. One trend that has been going on, of course, for the first half of 2020 is the work from hotel arrangement being implemented by some hotel brands. This is basically offering corporate accounts to some companies who would prefer to locate their employees in the hotels, not only for them to stay, but also for them to work at. So it is a good arrangement being encountered by a lot of companies nowadays to enable their employees to still continue work while near their place of work. Next is the industrial sector. Of course, e-commerce has really spurred a lot of growth for the logistics and industrial sector. As more people have remained at home, we have seen a spike in demand, of course, for online shopping. And this, of course, in turn have affected the increase of demand for warehouse spaces from our clients. Areas outside Manila, of course, are the preferred locations like Cavite, Laguna, Bulacan, and Pampanga have seen some demand in warehouse spaces. For the land sector, not much have we've seen not too much growth in terms of commercial land values, given the fact that, of course, commercial land in major business district are still being valued, no, for their prime locations. The fact that these developers have decided to retain their properties means that they, of course, they still have confidence in the coming months that things will get better. However, select landowners, smaller developers who were before very adamant in keeping their land have slowly decided to sell their properties at very, very attractive prices. You can see the year-on-year growth rate for the prime central business districts. Bay Area, Makati, Quezon City, Alabang are things to, of course, take note of because of the growth in terms of the commercial land values. We see as the months go by, especially once we enter 2021, we see land values to start picking up in terms of appreciation. As mentioned a while ago, we have received a lot of inquiries from developers who have decided to sell their properties. No? Commercial land sector, we believe, is slowly shifting to a buyer's market. The uncertainties in the, of course, the landscape have pushed the sellers to actively look for buyers, for them to be able to prioritize liquidity and preserve cash on their own. So commercial land market deviating from the seller's market means people who are looking to buy properties at an advantage, as more sellers, of course, are willing to sell their properties and much, of course, appealing terms and prices. So this is particularly very, very beneficial to the buyers wanting to land bank or invest for future development. Lastly, of course, in the commercial land sector, a lot of companies nowadays prefer to locate in major townships due to the limitations in travel. Township developments have continued to spur outside major CBDs of Metro Manila. Right now, there are about a total of 79 townships outside of Metro Manila, and more is expected to be developed, of course, in the coming years, starting 2021. As more companies start to move to the provinces, decentralization pushed by the government has encouraged a lot of people to really move out of the provinces. Of course, this is really dependent on the infrastructure developments brought about by the current administration. So the move of private developers to locate outside is really dependent on the infrastructure that will be made available to them in the coming years. That concludes the presentation for Metro Manila. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Sir Cholo, for that insightful and very informative presentation about the property trends and updates in Metro Manila. So just to recap, actually, so we originally had a poll at the beginning of this presentation. And before we move on to Cebu, in the spirit of decentralization, the question earlier was which is the most promising, which, in your opinion, which of the following is the most promising trend in the real estate market? And 38% of our audience answered e-commerce. 26% answered office decentralization, which is in line with what Sir Cholo and I'm sure the rest of our speakers will be talking about. So, Sir Adem, before we go on to Metro Cebu, um, Sir Cholo presented, talked about Clark and the office decentralization. Can you give us a few, just short insight before we start in Cebu about the movement? Is it positive? Is it negative? What do you see? Short lang po.
Hi everyone, good afternoon po. Yeah, lahat ng sinabi ni Cholo are actually the vision of government when you talk about decentralization. No? That's precisely why there's this build infrastructure project of government. Decentralization is important because you cannot really, put everything in one basket. And this is precisely what's happening right now. And in the last couple of months, since the ECQ was implemented by the national government here in Luzon, we really have seen a lot of, particularly the BPO sectors, wanting to immediately open up and relocate here because of the chaos that happened in Manila when this thing, started. That's why there's really a need for us to really, handhold together and think of ways on how we can develop a strategy within which each one can really survive. And decentralization is really one key factor in the survival of most industries, if not all.
Okay, thank you, Sir Adem. In the spirit of decentralization, I'm sure now we can move on to our next presenter. So we have Miss Ruth Coyoca, our regional head for Visayas, all the way in Cebu. Hi, Miss Ruth. So without further ado.
All right. Thank you, Pia. Good afternoon, everyone. Now, zooming in to the Queen City of the South, I think everybody knows that the Central Visayas region, particularly Cebu City, has been hard hit during this pandemic. From ECQ to GCQ, back to ECQ again after a rapid increase in the number of COVID-19 cases. Truly, the resiliency of the Cebuanos has really been tested during this pandemic. And now that we're under GCQ again, everybody's taking this chance to slowly recover, get back on our feet, and enable the economic growth again. So I'll be sharing with you the status of one of the economic drivers in the region, the real estate sector, through this Metro Cebu property market overview, covering the first half of 2020, starting off with the office sector. So during the ECQ, constructions were halted, causing delays with the turnover of office spaces in Metro Cebu. But now that we're already under GCQ, constructions are allowed and developers have started to resume their impeded developments. For the second half of 2020 up to year 2022, it is expected that a bulk of the upcoming office supply will be located in Cebu City, specifically within the business parks, garnering a share of about 79% of the total upcoming office supply in Metro Cebu. For the first half of 2020, Cebu City has still got the greatest number of office supply by square meters at 890,000 square meters, followed by 75,000 square meters from Mandaue City and 40,000 square meters from Lapu-Lapu City. So here's a breakdown of the PEZA accredited IT centers in Metro Cebu. And as you can see, 25 of these IT centers are located in Cebu City, while 13 are in Mandaue City. And there's a total of 7 IT parks in Metro Cebu, where majority is located in Cebu City. Okay, in terms of the office take-up by industry, the IT BPO sector remains to be the main driver that takes almost half of the industry as it continues to transform Metro Cebu's labor market into one of today's main job generators. This just goes to show that Cebu is still the expansion of choice of the IT BPM sector outside of Metro Manila. The increasing number of business parks and PEZA-registered IT centers within the area makes Metro Cebu a more attractive destination for occupiers, not to mention its competitiveness in terms of manpower, infrastructure, and cost of doing business. These BPO firms and other office demand drivers have also started to look outside of Cebu City and explore other areas in Mandaue, in Lapu-Lapu City, as well as in different township developments like that of South Road Properties. SRP is a 300-hectare government-owned reclamation area located somewhere in the southern part of Cebu City, near Talisay City, where more commercial developments are expected to rise in the area. For the first half of 2020, Metro Cebu's overall rental rates remained relatively stable with an average of 5% year-on-year growth, but it may experience a decrease or stagnation in the second half of 2020 due to a slowdown in demand of office space and the pre-termination of lease contract of other firms, especially during the ECQ. It is still expected, though, that once the office market recuperates, major demand driver will still come from the IT BPM industry, as more companies, especially foreign companies, are expected to offshore and outsource services in the Philippines. As you can see in the graph, Cebu City remains to have the most premium office rates among the highly urbanized cities of Cebu, with a rate of 1,000 per square meter, followed by 800 per square meter in Mandaue City and 700 per square meter for Lapu-Lapu City. Now moving on to the next sector, the hotel sector. As one of the top tourist destinations in the country, the tourism industry in Cebu has taken a dramatic slump during the pandemic crisis. And the hotel sector has adopted several ways to minimize big losses during the first half of 2020. One of which is through leasing out hotel rooms to BPO companies so that their employees can continue working during ECQ. This is the same case as what Sir Solo mentioned in Metro Manila. So almost 75% of the bookings came from the standard and economy category, as these are the hotels that can be flexible in giving more affordable rates to corporate leases of these BPO firms. The typical room rates in Metro Cebu range from 700 to 4,200 pesos per night for the standard and economy category, and it can go as high as 5,000 to 10,500 per room per night for the deluxe category. But during ECQ, special rates were provided, of course, with lean operation setup and safety measures in place to accommodate the needs of the BPO firms. Now moving on to the industrial sector, warehouse rental rate in Metro Cebu remains at a range of around 150 to 450 per square meter, with most of the warehouses located in Mandaue City, as it is dubbed as the industrial hub of the region, due to its proximity to ports and airport, while most of its ecozones are in Lapu-Lapu City. As you can see in the map, the distribution of warehouses in Metro Cebu actually supports the move of logistics and manufacturing firms in the region for decentralization. Therefore, these firms are aggressively adopting the hub and spoke model, as mentioned also a while ago, where these industrial firms are putting up several small hubs or satellite sites in strategic areas in the region to better serve their customers. In terms of the land sector, Cebu City remains to have the highest selling price per square meter among the highly urbanized cities and the most competitive one for income generation. With the continued increase in commercial and residential developments in Cebu City, it maintains its position as a hotbed for commercialization, centralization, and business growth. Meanwhile, Lapu-Lapu City and Mandaue City, though both considered as emerging cities, are expected to have more master plan developments underway. The likes of these premium and world-class developments, the Mandani Bay in Mandaue City and Mactansi Grove in Lapu-Lapu City. Additionally, the completion of Mactan Airport's expansion plan and the infrastructure projects such as the Cebu-Cordova link is expected to spur growth in the region due to the improved connection with the neighboring cities of Cebu and the easy access of foreign investors to explore business opportunities in the Visayas region. So overall, Metro Cebu will continue to be one of the preferred investment destinations outside Metro Manila due to its solid foundation and the region's readiness for massive growth, supported by the aggressive initiatives and collaboration of both the public and private sector, to boost investment opportunities while adapting to the new normal ways of doing business. Yeah, so that actually ends the presentation for Metro Cebu. Pia?
Hi, okay, awesome. Thank you, Ms. Ruth, for that very insightful presentation about Metro Cebu. Let's actually move on to our poll. So earlier, while Ms. Ruth was presenting, we actually had a poll about which real estate sector do you think will recover the fastest? And over 56% of our respondents say that the industrial sector, with 56%, the industrial sector will recover the fastest. And I guess this is also in line with, what you've mentioned about the industrial sector booming in Mandaue, and also with the decentralization and e-commerce booming, especially here in Metro Manila, and also linking all the way down to Davao. So before we move on, I would like to actually, well, I think Sir Jet isn't here. I believe Sir Jet has left the room. It's fine. Okay. It's all right. We can actually first show the next poll. So this is more for the outlook as well of the Philippine business environment and the real estate market. So without further ado, I would like to call on Miss Chai. Are you ready, Miss Chai? So Miss Chai will now discuss the Davao property market and the overview for the first half of 2020.
Hello, everyone. Warmest greetings from Davao City. Can you hear me? I'm good. Okay. Let's start off Davao property market report on the office sector. Move my slide. Okay. While there's still around 43,000 square meters of office supply spaces expected to be completed this year, most office building constructions, as we are all aware, were put on hold during the ECQ, and supply is perceived to still grow despite the pandemic. However, general office space demand is expected to decrease in the second half of 2020, which may reduce overall occupancy, particularly in the grades A and B buildings, with occupancy rate drop of an average of 87% from the 93% recorded last year. Recovery, though, is expected by 2021. Office buildings in the pipeline are the Mosa Diamond Tower, Robinson Cybergate, and the Aeon Towers. Next. Okay, for the rental rates, office rental rates in the key districts typically fall in the range of 475 to 800 square meters, still in the Lanang Bahada area, the prime now, 500 to 600 in the Matina district, and 475 to 750 in the Poblacion area. Davao City remains a growing IT BPO hub for investors given its proficient manpower and workforce, plus a highly educated talent pool. Now, 60% of existing office space take-up is by in this industry of IT BPO. Generally, though, demand for office space have been on a decline, and I think that's expected nationwide. Now, for the PESA accredited IT centers here in Davao City, it has proliferated in the past years, and they are from the major developers such as SM Prime and Mega World. They have an optimistic performance at 92% occupancy as of last year, and we anticipate a gradual recovery in 2021 as outsourcing firms and traditional companies adjust. Now, for the hotel sector. Okay, I'll show you first the PESA zones in Davao region for IT Park, and IT Center. So we have a lot here already. And as mentioned earlier, after Manila and Cebu, Davao is already our next mega hub for IT BPOs. For the hotel sector, okay, This is one of the most impacted compared to other property sector. Suffered a stunted growth in terms of the 2020 supply, especially for us here in Davao. There being no additional recorded for the year, and with the closure of our iconic Marco Polo, we had Acacia Hotel, who we just opened recently, but is on temporary operations pause. Grand Regal is on a renovation until next year. And of course, travel bans are still imposed. So upcoming hotel developments set up for 2020 will most likely be in the next year of 2021 and 22 instead. Now, let me slide my... Similar with other cities, Metro Davao depended on corporate accounts for sources of revenue, and with the cancellation of annual events being celebrated such as Araw ng Davao, Kadayawan, and including the highly anticipated MICE 2020, which we were supposed to be hosting this September, were all definitely game-changing. We have already recorded 2.4 million tourist arrival last year. And for Araw ng Davao celebration alone, it recorded a loss of around 200,000 domestic and foreign tourists. And many hotels now have room rates cut as much as 50 to 70% in efforts to sustain operations. However, we're hearing a lot of good news in terms of what's coming next. So we're still hopeful, especially here in Davao. It's always been, it's always been organic. Davao will always still be your next tourist destination. For land sector, land selling values in the three major districts continue to see similar growth. And with our build initiative and progressive commercialization as the main key demand drivers. There are still a lot of projects in the build which will push through, especially this. There's our NEDA approved already Samal Bridge to ground break in the last quarter of this year, and construction period to last until 2024. We've been waiting for this, so we are really looking forward, and we are also to as much as 80 to 90%. This will push through already, it being NEDA approved. For this slide next. I'll show you Davao Townships at a glance. So here it is at a glance. Additionally, more developers are positioning in these three locations to erect township developments. So thereby spurring further growth and consequently reflecting investors' confidence in the city. There was no stopping on the township development that have started in the past year with the likes of Davao IT Park, Global Township of Cebu Master, as well as Cove, and even LPU Town Center. Also interesting to note, given that Davao region remained strong, particularly in agriculture, the very promising project of the Mosalan, this one, provided an agriculture-focused mixed-use property development located in Panabo and launched just last February. This may well be another more than just an investment hub, but a tourist attraction in Mindanao soon. Now moving on to the more positive news for you coming from Davao. The Davao industrial warehouses are condensed outside the metro, but it's really booming. I would like to even refer to it as the logistics real estate. So for 2020, we see the emergence of this logistics real estate with warehouse developments and operations now booming in the fringe areas of the city. There's Panakan, Malagamot, Bunawan, Turil. Even I have already the courage to go out to view them because there's really that much demand coming from e-commerce and probably the new normal that we get used to now. 4 major PEZA zones can be found in the region, and the combined areas of this manufacturing zone is equal to about 390 hectares. Davao is still looking into studying how we can position an industrial park within the city in the next few years. Okay. I think that ends my presentation, but as I close my presentation, I mentioned this time and again, I am a migrant Davaoeña, but 15 years is more than enough to prove that every crisis or challenges we experience here in Davao gives us an opportunity to demonstrate our resiliency. be that martial law or earthquake or now even COVID, we move on and look forward. We still believe in our famous hashtag, and that is life is here. Come to Davao again soon. Mayong buntag and daghang salamat.
Thank you very much, just Ms. Chai. That was a very insightful and informative presentation. I'm sure we learned a lot more about Davao. All right, so thank you again to our previous three speakers. I think Sir Cholo is back. So we can now move on to the very heart, or at least, to summarize everything that we've learned today. We have a couple of questions that came from our social media and also from our attendees here today. So we can go on to our panel discussion. And here we would really like to highlight that Sir Adem, our representative from Clark Development Corporation, and Sir Jet. Hi, Sir Jet. Is your internet stable?
Um, I think it has improved already.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, unfortunately, because of the incoming, may incoming po atang bagyo, si Hener. So let's try our best. Okay, so we can start now with the first question. So I would like to ask the panel, with the disruptions in the property market, how is the real estate sector adjusting to cater to the new normal? Which among these changes you think will last? So maybe Sir Rodem and Sir Jet, I know you of all people would understand that the real estate sector of the companies and the business circles that you represent. What can you say about this matter?
Jet, you want to go first?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Well, first, I'd like to greet everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you to everyone who participated to our webinar. Thank you, Brodem, for also accepting our invitation. And to my colleagues at Prime, thank you for the very insightful presentation. Well, to answer the question, one thing comes into mind for me. A couple of months ago, there was a proposal by the national government for the Balik Probinsya. And I see that this will definitely happen, faster. And we personally, I think a lot of the provinces surrounding Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, Metro Davao, with usually before the pandemic, these are highly populated area. There's a lot of congestion. Now, a lot of companies have been saying that they are already doing work from home because their employees, their families do not want them to go back to Metro Manila, at least for the short term, because of fear of the virus getting infected and so on. So I think one thing that will last is the growth of these key provinces, key cities outside of Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, Metro Davao. And there's a lot of things that will drive that growth, not just the pandemic per se, but also for provinces with existing infrastructure projects. For example, for Clark, I've been going in and out of Clark for several months now, and infrastructure is there even before the pandemic. There's an airport that was recently completed by Megawide, and there are already existing facilities that BPO companies can utilize of. And even before the pandemic, again, the IT BPM sector has been there for many, many years. And now, given that Metro Manila is greatly affected, a lot of Pampangueños who used to stay and live in Metro Manila to go to their offices are now back in Pampanga and are currently working from home. And for some other companies who cannot afford their employees to work from home, they have taken the opportunity to rent office spaces in Clark just so that their employees can continue working in their offices, but now only closer. So this example, I think, will happen even to Laguna and Cavite, where there are certain specific areas where there are good infrastructure, existing facilities, and good number of talent pool. So same thing will also happen in Davao. Same thing will happen in Cebu. So I guess that's one thing to really consider in the short term and even up to short term, mid term, and long term. No, obviously there are a lot of scenarios that may still happen, but right now we know that the metro cities are the have the highest risk to highest risk for health and for getting infected for the virus. So now people really know that they have to go out and go to provinces with lesser population, lesser congestion, and so on. So that's my answer.
All right, thanks, Sir Jet. Sir Adem, maybe you have something to add. I know that coming from Clark itself, you would know more, like similarly like Miss Chai and Miss Ruth, where the expansion will be.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Jet. Unang-una, the most immediate that the real estate sector would really have to adjust to would be yung kanilang development. I'm talking about those who are still or would be constructing. Because with the new normal, maraming mag-iibang design when you talk about the interiors, when you talk about the entrances, the cafes and all that. So that's one that would have to be looked at. The design and development of properties will have to be altered to suit the new normal. Secondly, even urban planners now will also have to adjust to this new normal in conformity to all this movement of people, movement of vehicles and all. So that's the first. That's the most immediate. Secondly, I think you should also consider that while we are, trying to address this pandemic here in the Philippines, in our own country, there's also an economic, event happening in the world right now. And I've happened to be fortunate enough to join a top-level meeting in government, and we are also preparing to target a lot of those industries wanting to leave certain countries and looking at the Philippines as a relocation site. So we're looking at a lot of warehousing demands. We're looking at, this was also, confirmed by Cholo earlier, a lot of manufacturing and definitely a lot of mixed use development that would have to support and complement this manufacturing and warehousing. And when the ECQ, happened here in Clark, here in Pampanga, the two most resilient sectors that we've seen would definitely be number one, manufacturing, as consistent as what was discussed by the three speakers. And secondly is the BPO, because they have the flexibility of, of working from home. And we see Clark specifically here in this area, the emergence of a digital hub, the emergence of industries of companies looking for office buildings. That's how we envision the Freeport Zone. But there's another place which we call the New Clark City, which was also discussed earlier by Cholo. New Clark City will then be complementing the Freeport Zone because that's the place, that's the area where the bigger factories whom we are targeting will be placed. So these are the changes that we see happening immediately from a construction point of view, and then trade alliances that we see happening soon that will benefit the country. So those are the events that we should be prepared for, or the real estate sector should be prepared for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Adem. That's actually very insightful because I feel like it's definitely something that we should be looking forward to. And we've been hearing about it in the news, but it's not necessarily something that we've heard from someone who actually has experience working with it. So thank you. We can move on to our next question. And I think this is this is for Sir Jet. As mentioned in the report, we're already experiencing a buyer's market. So what are the certain investment opportunities in this market? How would you say that people can take advantage of it? Or how do you think people will be moving in this kind of sphere?
Well, yeah. The direct answer is if the buyer's market favors investors or people, businesses who have very conservative financial position, who are not highly leveraged, who are currently liquid. No, so when you enter a buyer's market, normally the first batch of sellers would be the ones who will really need to liquidate their properties as ASAP in order to raise liquidity, to lessen loans, lessen their debts, pay off existing mortgages, and so on. Now, I think that's where we are at right now. No, given the lockdown, obviously the first 2-3 months of lockdown, and then recently Metro Manila entered another MECQ. I think a lot of people haven't really felt that yet because there's still a lot of concessions that were being extended by banks and so on. No? But I guess we are already in this situation right now. And the second batch of properties that will be open in the market might be, sadly, it may be foreclosures. No, and to take advantage of those opportunities, I think a lot of companies are really, in any crisis, the word is cash is king. No, so almost every market worldwide, this is a global situation, not just the Philippines, are experiencing we just entered recession, but the world is already in recession. No? So to take advantage of these opportunities, first you have to really look into, I think personally, this is my opinion, but first you have to really take a look into the movement of the market, look for disruptions, look for where is the market going, how is the behavior of the market, and once you identify that, you monitor that if that will last, if that is only a hype, if that is only a short-term movement, probably. Now, if you have identified the behavior that this may last or not, again, everything is uncertain nowadays, and from there, from those limited data assessment that you have, you can take a bet. You can put in some investment, some money. So at least back to real estate, we see that there are a few inquiries that's growing in the segment of office space acquisition. Some companies who have experience, who used to take up so many office spaces in the past, rent a lot of office spaces. Normally, you pay rental security deposit, you renovate your own offices. And then suddenly the pandemic happened, lockdown happened, and most of them had to give up the existing offices that they were only renting. And that's when a lot of people sometimes realize that, hey, if I own this office space, this should have been an existing asset to my company. So there are quite a few now growing inquiries for owning their own office spaces because I guess that's the short-term reaction of the market now, at least for the office sector. No, so I think in the medium term until next year, people will still opt to look for. For companies who can afford owning an office space, they will still look at that. For other companies who are starting new ventures, small startup, medium startup, who cannot afford their own office space, they've been working on some deals with co-working companies and hotels. So hotel facilities have also well adapted to the market demands. Their function rooms were already leased out as like a temporary service office or co-working facilities. Same way for co-working companies, I see that there are very flexible terms offered to small and medium enterprise companies. No? So I think, again, in any crisis, there is opportunity. And if you look at the word crisis, you have to you need to have a mindset that in any crisis, it's a pivotal moment for you to reevaluate the whole situation, reevaluate the goals of your real estate company in order to survive. So 2020 is definitely a very interesting year. It's all about assessing the market very, very closely for whatever opportunities that would highly benefit your business goals. No?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sir Jet. I mean, that is true. Like, especially now, we have to understand that there are different pivots in the market in terms of where businesses will choose to make their investments. And it is true that in every crisis is again an opportunity. So thank you for that. Let's move on to our next question. Our next question. Okay, I think this is for Sir Radem. So how can developers, landlords, and businesses mitigate bigger losses during these uncertain times? And what are some of the low-lying fruits that they can take advantage of? Perhaps you can also consider from the perspective of, well, at least in CGC, you've already mentioned that there are certain big international firms that are considering the Philippines. How does that fall into like where we present as the Philippines? Like, is it still a low-lying fruit, or are there other opportunities that we could be taking advantage of as Filipinos? Oh, Sir Radem, I think you're muted po.
How now? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
perfect. We can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me tell everybody that there's this group called Team Philippines. No? So it's an aggregation of all the economic zone authorities, investment promotion authorities, including DTI and BOI as lead agency. Whenever we market the Philippines, whenever we go out as a group, all the way from Davao to Luzon, we travel as one, we act as one, we market the Philippines as one. So whoever gets the deal, whoever gets the locator, whoever gets the investment, it's good enough for everyone. No? Unlike before, kanya-kanya. No? But this time around, it's really Team Philippines. No? That is important because, especially now, there's this Bayanihan Hilas 1 Act. No, it's now part 2. No, there's a legislation that to extend the initial legislation made. It's all about the whole of government approach in order to really address and mitigate all these consequences of the health crisis. But then again, kailangan din po ang participation and active participation ng private sector. And with this, kailangan din po kayo, the real estate, PAREB and everybody else, all your associations that represent the sector. Because kailangan din po ng government ang inyong voice in order to craft a policy that we can move forward faster. So it's not just about us talking right now, wanting to strategize on how to, adjust to the new normal, adjust to trade events, world events, global, in a global or local scale, domestic. But it's really about us, reaching out to the government on how we can act as one. So that's very important because hindi ho magkakaroon ng karapat-dapat na polisiya when you talk about taxation, when you talk about incentives, when you talk about budget and economic initiatives without our voice being heard. So it's not just Clark, it's not just Cebu or Davao, it's the whole Philippines. That's why I was emphasizing the importance on how we were marketing the Philippines as one. It doesn't matter if you're from the south or or wherever. So we really have to act as one. So that's very important. Now, to go back to your question, from a point of view of a developer or a specific city or location, there is the need to really relax restrictions. Restrictions that would include city hall regulations, restrictions with respect to the developers, the building owners themselves. We have one or two developers here in Clark na even before government, uh, issued a directive not to collect rental for several months or 3 months during the ECQ, ginawa na nila yon, So that is something that should be welcomed by all because the key right now is for everyone to survive. The other thing is part of what we can do from a developer's point of view, real estate developers, building owners, is that we can probably encourage or promote or allow our tenants to do other things within their property, because I do know that part of your restrictions is to limit them to do certain business activities within their space. But right now we're looking at as ways of mitigating the situation is allowing, beyond what was the business permit approval of each locator on how they can do other businesses that were not previously contemplated within the context of their business permit or within their registration. So those are some of the things that we can think about in order to mitigate itong nangyayari sa mga negosyo, mga ating mga enterprises, no. So yeah, but I'm sure there are a lot of things that people can suggest, but these are the things that I can say that it works. And again, I'd like to give so much emphasis on working hand in hand with local government, with national government. So it works because when the ECQ happened the first time, the first month, we immediately called all the mayors because Clark is an autonomous area here in Pampanga. So it is managed not by a local government. We have no mayor here, but it's precisely managed by a corporation. No. But despite our being autonomous, we reach out to all the governors and the mayors because many of our workers here are coming from their localities. So we have to ensure the movement of people. We have to ensure that there will be people coming to work here inside the Freeport zone. So we created a manual, a cooperation to ensure the smooth flowing, the smooth interzonal, intercity travel of people. So it's precisely about cooperation. It's precisely about handholding. I did mention that the first question that was asked from me kanina. So it's all about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Dan. That was very insightful. I mean, I do agree that especially now we have to be a little bit more creative in terms of the decision making that we make from all sectors and all levels, and it's very important that we all do work together, and it's not necessarily a time that we should be belittling even the smallest ideas. So thank you for that. Okay, I think we can move on to the next and final question, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we're a little bit over time, but um yes. All right. So actually, I can give the panel maybe a few more seconds just to think over a question, because this is open to all of our panelists. Just give a short insight based on how you see this happening, because obviously this has been the whole topic of our webinar this afternoon. So maybe just from your personal insight would be very, very helpful. For all of our attendees here today, thank you again for joining us this afternoon. And we would also like to remind everyone that tomorrow will be the release of Prime Philippines publication, as well as the premium subscription for this publication. So if you are interested, and I'm sure many of you are, of everything that we've talked about, further details and even more data will be made available tomorrow. So please watch out on our social media channels and your email for further details. So maybe for this last question, whoever wants to start, please feel free. How is the government's decentralization push influencing the movement of the real estate sector? How do you see businesses and investors reacting to this? So again, we've covered all these topics before. We've been talking about it for the past hour and a bit. Maybe for your own personal perspective, anecdotes that you would like to share. Let's just keep it short and sweet so that we can close this webinar with a very strong finish. So who would like to begin?
Okay, I can.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
Oh, Cholo, you'd like to start? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sir Cholo.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say lang that, of course, I've talked about decentralization in my presentation, and um, I definitely think that with what all that's been going on since March, the lockdowns, a lot of people have been losing jobs. The economy has been greatly affected. I think the private sector, in particular, has been very active, no, as what Rodem has mentioned, in coordinating and dealing with the public sector in terms of finding potential locations, no, for for expansion in the countryside, because the decentralization, of course, the main objective, of course, is countryside development. So with that said, I think a lot of landlords are also very keen and optimistic about the decentralization plans of the government. They also are very dependent on the build, build, build. What will happen to the build, build, build? Because development, of course, of developments, especially townships, are really dependent on infrastructure that is made available to them in their respective cities or provinces. So I think with that in place in the coming years, even after the term of our present administration, I think with all infrastructure developments in place in Davao, in Clark, in Cebu, in Bacolod, all these main cities, I think that the private developers will see a lot of reason to start building mixed-use township developments, because after all, in the new normal, a lot of companies and families, of course, would like to be located in locations where they have everything all in one place, all together. So this is very much, of course, would be beneficial to their way of life, how they work. That's all. Thank you.
Well,
Okay,
Jack,
thank you,
you
Sir
know that.
Hava. Maybe Sir. Okay, Sir Jet.
just to add to what Cholo mentioned, I think the current attention given by the national government for decentralization will expedite the movement, no, of companies, businesses to consider and to expand in the in outside metro cities. However, the current challenges really that's being experienced by a lot of investors and companies is well, first the on and off of the lockdown, which really hampers and hinders the execution plans. You know, so I think that's only a short term effect. No, but however, you know, once we have learned how to live with the COVID situation, we have learned how to go about it. Um, the decentralization to outside provinces will not stop, and I think it will really continue for the long term, just like what I also said earlier. No, so just for the short term, I know we have a lot of clients who've been telling us, hey, you know, what are the recent movements to outside Metro Manila movements and so on. I would say that currently there are a lot of clients, companies that we're talking to who are closely assessing and studying those options, and a few have already taken the move. Okay, a few have already taken the move to the move to close their contracts to outside Metro Manila spaces. No, so for the short term, it's really about closely assessing the market, studying the market closely, because it's hard, no, to move and to make any major movements when all of a sudden we will be back in lockdown and the teams are working remotely. So these are internal problems that's being experienced by business owners, which I think is not unusual. Worldwide, we're all experiencing this. So we should look at the medium term. Once we have learned how to cope up with this current situation, including health risks, financial risks, and so on, I think now is really the best time to look into this, to look into the decentralization effort of the government and for the private sector to do their own due diligence and studies, no, to prepare for this decentralization. Because once this starts, I think tuloy-tuloy na yan.
Okay, thank you, Sir Jet. Perhaps Sir Adem or Miss Chai, Miss Ruth?
Yeah, I think I can go na. Okay. Basically to support what Sir Jet and Sir Cholo had already mentioned, the decentralization move of the government has started long before this COVID-19 pandemic struck the country. Township developments were already built outside Metro Manila. IT parks and business parks were constructed in different emerging cities in the Philippines, not just in Cebu, in Davao, even in Bacolod, Iloilo. And I just think that now more than ever, the developers and the occupiers have realized the importance of bringing the livelihood of their employees closer to home, so that in cases of emergencies or crises like this, there will still be business continuity. So like for example, in Cebu, as mentioned in my presentation, there are already several township developments here, and more developments will be underway, not just in Metro Cebu, but even in other areas outside, like in the other cities, in Taglisay City, Minglanilla, Consolacion, and even in other areas of the Visayas region, such as yun nga, sa Iloilo and then in sa Bacolod. And then for the past months also, we've been getting inquiries from tenants who would like to put up their branches also, not just in Cebu City, but would also want to explore other areas, even as far as in Davao, in Mindanao, in Pampanga, in Cavite. And so I think for the next months, we'll still be seeing more of this movement, more township developments, more decentralization of operations from the different industry across the country, more people moving out of Metro Manila to decongest and support the Balik Probinsya program of the government, basically to explore opportunities near their place. So there.
Thanks, Ms. Ruth. Perhaps we can actually have Miss Chai first. I mean, since we're already talking
Yes.
about Cebu, we can go on to Davao, and then to close everything off, Sir Rodem.
Okay. Few months back, I was talking about decentralization, centralized, decentralized in one of our office, brainstorming. And I couldn't explain myself, having gone through different financial crises in the past, what decentralization, centralization means. And now I think it's here, it's present, we're doing it. Now for Mindanao, we welcome, and I believe Mindanao investors and businesses look forward to that Balik Probinsya initiative. The government will eventually help us. This will eventually help us boost the retail and the commercial segments of the real estate. And I believe also that the government, as like what Mr. Demas mentioned earlier, is helping us hand on hand to go through the next phases of what we're encountering at the moment. So there's always hope. There's always hope, and there's always, of course, the wanting to be able to cooperate so that we move forward to this pandemic. That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Miss Chai. And then to close things off, I think, Sir Rodem, what do you have to say on the matter?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate sana palagi may ganito, no? So we can really promote itong ating initiative on how we can move forward and faster. Anyway, yung decentralization given na yan, it started with an administrative order by President Duterte na wala nang incentive NCR, so people will have to be moving out of the NCR in order to be incentivized as a business. No? Second, the CREATE bill is also consistent with that mission and vision of Malacanang, because it puts more weight, it puts more incentives to those wanting to look at the countryside. No? And thirdly, it's now a program, no? The Balik Probinsya, as mentioned by Jen. So that's a given. All what we have to do is really to be prepared for it. No, this is not the time to slow down. This is the time to really pursue. Although some of us really have a different, mind frame in looking at this pandemic as a whole thing, but it should not, slow down for most of us who have started developing, who have started constructing. Dapat tuloy, because the travel ban exceptions have been lifted. Kasi what's really killing us now is really the movement of people, especially those who wanted to come here to sign deals, who wanted to come here for a little bit of tourism, So pag nawala na ho yan, once that is lifted, then you can be assured that, our economy really, take off. So yon. But what's important also is good corporate governance. No? We may boast of our infrastructure, we may boast of our modernization, of whatever nature, facilities, urban planning and all. Kaya lang, if we do not practice good governance, pag meron pa rin corruption, wala akong kwenta lahat yan. No, I can say this from a point of view of a government employee, 26 years corporate experience na you can boast of everything, pero kung merong hihingi, may tatanggap, may corruption, wala ho yan. So with that, we can hand hold together and be as one in trying to address this, so we can all take off again and reopen the economy. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, to end everything and to cap things off, I would just like to remind all of our attendees that on the right, we actually have the offer for Prime Philippines Road to Recovery Sentiments and Strategy Conspectus. So this is volume 2 of our real estate research compendium. And for all those who obviously want to learn more about what we've talked about today, you can subscribe and you can also download our research publication so that you can learn more and delve deeper into the little data points and see how that can affect and positively influence your business decisions. So with that, I would like to thank all of our speakers today, Miss Ruth, Miss Chai, Sir Cholo, Sir Radem, and Sir Jet. I hope everybody can tune in to our next webinar in the future. And I would like to greet everybody a happy Friday and please have a happy weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Bye, everyone.
everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Stay safe. Stay
Stay
safe,
safe,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.